I was supposed to be happy. I should have been excited. My birthday was just a few hours away. But instead of candles and cake, I found betrayal. Rotten. Ugly. Clothes. It happened the night before my 32nd birthday. The night I caught my girlfriend in bed with my best friend. Her name was Jessica. Jess, as everyone called her. We'd been together for almost 4 years. She had this way of making a man feel like the only one in the world. Big brown eyes, soft voice, and a laugh that could light up a room. And my best friend? That was Mike. We'd been inseparable since high school, the kind of bond that felt like family. Through college, shitty jobs, breakups, everything, he was my brother. So what the hell happened? That evening started like any other. Jess said she had a headache. Mike texted me around 7 p.m. Yo, pre-birthday beer? Just one. I told him I'd swing by his place for a quick drink before midnight. But something felt off. Jess had been distant all week. Mike too. Less talkative. Avoiding eye contact. I thought maybe they were planning something for my birthday. A surprise party. A weekend trip. I even felt guilty for being suspicious. But that feeling kept clawing at me. So instead of heading to Mike's place, I turned around. Went home early. The apartment was dark. Quiet. Too quiet. I walked in, called out her name. Nothing. Checked the bedroom. Empty. But the bathroom light was on. Voices. Muffled. Laughing. Then silence. I stood outside the door, heart pounding. My hand reached for the handle. And then I heard it. His voice. Mike. Whispering something I'll never forget. You really think he doesn't know? She giggled. Said something back. Low. Teasing. I opened the door. And there they were. Naked. Tangled in each other. Frozen like animals caught in headlights. My body went cold. My mind blank. I couldn't move. Couldn't speak. Mike scrambled, grabbing his clothes. Jess just stared. No apology. No shame. Just silence. The kind that screams louder than any words. I wish I could say I exploded. That I screamed. Punched a wall. Did something. But I didn't. I just stood there. Watching the two people I trusted most scramble like cowards. Mike couldn't even look me in the eye. He pulled on his jeans, muttering, "It's not what it looks like," which was so pathetic I almost laughed. Jess stayed on the bed, a sheet clutched around her, her face blank. No guilt, no panic, just a dull stare like she was already somewhere else. The silence between us was suffocating. I finally managed to say, "How long?" Jess blinked, looked away. Mike ran a hand through his hair, pacing like some caged animal, still trying to find words that wouldn't make him look like a piece of shit. Too late for that. 3 months, she finally said. Soft, calm, like she was ordering coffee. 3 fucking months. Every memory from the past 90 days started flashing through my head. The missed calls, the late nights, her sudden interest in solo time, Mike canceling our usual game nights, the weird energy whenever the three of us were in the same room. It all made sense now. Too much sense. Why? I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. That's what I really needed. Not the timeline. Not the details. Just the damn why. Jess shrugged. That's what she gave me. A goddamn shrug. I don't know. It just happened. It just happened. Like they tripped and fell into each other's arms. Like love was an accident. Like my heart wasn't lying there on the carpet, bleeding out at their feet. Mike tried to talk then. Stepped toward me, hands raised like he was about to deliver some profound apology that would somehow make this better. I held up a hand. Don't, I said. He stopped. Good. Because if he'd said one more word, I might have actually lost control. I walked out. Didn't take anything. Not my keys. Not my phone. Not my pride. Just my broken self. I wandered for hours. Through the city, past bars, past birthday decorations already hung in shop windows, past happy couples holding hands like the world hadn't just crumbled in my chest. Somewhere around 3 a.m., I ended up sitting on a park bench, staring at nothing, asking myself the same question over and over again. How could they do this to me? I didn't sleep that night. Couldn't. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw them. The way they looked at each other when they thought I wasn't around. The shared glances I used to ignore. The private jokes I used to laugh at, not realizing I was the joke. I sat on that cold bench until the sky began to change, from black to deep navy, then to a faint gray. The kind of dawn that doesn't feel like a beginning, but like the slow unfolding of something that's already been broken beyond repair. By the time I got back to the apartment, the sun was rising. I stood in front of the door for a full minute, key in hand, my fingers trembling. My own place didn't feel like mine anymore. Felt tainted, violated, like I'd be walking back into someone else's nightmare. But I went in. I had to. I needed clothes, my wallet, my phone, all the things that made up the shell of the life I thought I had. Jess was gone. I don't know if that made it better or worse. Her side of the closet was still full, her toothbrush still in the cup beside mine, her perfume lingering in the air like a final slap in the face. I stared at the bed for a long time. The sheets were changed. Fresh. Too fresh. Like she was trying to erase what had happened. Wipe away the evidence. Clean the guilt. But it was still there. In the walls. In the silence. I sat on the edge of the bed, hands on my knees, and for the first time in years, I cried. Not the loud, dramatic kind. Not fists to the sky, movie scene kind of crying. Just quiet. Slow. Like my body was leaking out all the grief I didn't know how to process. I wasn't just mourning her. I was mourning the version of me who believed in her. The guy who thought he was building a future. The guy who believed in loyalty, in brotherhood, in love that doesn't cheat when you're not looking. I didn't go into work that day. I called in sick, voice hollow, trying not to let them hear the crack in it. They wished me a happy birthday before hanging up. Happy birthday, right? I spent most of that day walking through the city, replaying everything. The first time I introduced Jess to Mike. The way he smiled at her. Too wide, too eager. The nights I'd leave them alone for a few minutes while I grabbed more drinks or took a call. The late texts I assumed were harmless. How blind could I have been? Somewhere deep down, I think I knew. Not the details. Not the betrayal. But the shift. That gut feeling we ignore because we don't want it to be true. Because it's easier to believe we're just being paranoid than to accept that someone we love is capable of destroying us. By the evening, I was back at my place, sitting in silence, surrounded by birthday messages on my phone. Friends, co-workers, even family. All wishing me joy on a day that felt like the funeral of everything I trusted. And then, around 9 p.m., my phone buzzed again. It was Mike. One message. One line. Can we talk? I stared at that message for a long time. Just those 3 words. Can we talk? Sitting there on my screen like they weren't loaded with betrayal, like they weren't soaked in every drop of blood still leaking from the wound he'd helped tear open. My finger hovered over the screen. I thought about deleting it, blocking his number, pretending he never existed. But curiosity is a cruel thing, especially when you're grieving. Especially when the devil you once trusted starts knocking on the door of your pain, asking to be heard. I wrote back, "You've got 5 minutes. We met in the parking lot behind my building. Neutral ground." I didn't want him inside my home, not where he'd already crossed lines I never thought needed defending. When he pulled up in that beat-up silver truck I helped him buy 3 years ago, something inside me twisted. The memories were too loud. Of road trips, beer runs, late-night talks about our futures, women, life. Now all of it felt poisoned, fake, or worse, stolen. Mike got out slowly, hands in his jacket pockets like he wasn't sure if I was going to punch him or walk away. I didn't do either. I just stood there, arms crossed, watching the man I once called a brother turn into a stranger in real time. "I fucked up," he said, voice low, eyes on the ground. "I know that." I didn't respond. Didn't need to. The silence between us said enough. "I never meant for it to happen," he continued. "At first it was just flirting. Harmless shit. I thought she was just being nice. Then one night we had a few drinks and, I don't know, man, it spiraled. Spiraled. Like that word made it okay. Like this was some accidental descent into sin and not a deliberate betrayal, repeated over and over behind my back. She said you two were drifting apart. he added, and I saw red. Not just anger. Rage. A heat that started in my chest and pulsed outward. She said. I echoed. You mean the woman who was still sleeping in my bed? The one I was about to propose to? His face crumbled at that. You were? Yeah, I snapped. That's what last night was supposed to be about. The birthday dinner? I had the ring. In my damn jacket pocket. That hit him. I could see it. His mouth opened, then closed again. No words. Nothing to say. Because what can you say to that? What kind of apology fixes that? You know, I said after a long moment. When we were kids, you once told me you'd take a bullet for me. I still would, he said, and I laughed. A bitter, hollow laugh that echoed off the concrete. You already did, I said. You just aimed it at my back. He tried to say more. Something about being drunk. How it wasn't serious. That he thought I'd moved on emotionally. That Jess told him we were already broken before they even crossed the line. But none of it mattered. Every word felt like gasoline on a fire that had already turned to ash. You didn't just cheat with her, I said quietly. You killed something sacred. Friendship. Trust. Family. He stood there, helpless. And for the first time in my life, I saw Mike look small. Weak. Like a man who knew he'd burn down his own house for the thrill of watching it fall. I turned and walked away. Didn't look back. I didn't need to. Some endings don't need explosions. Just silence. And that night, the silence between us said everything. The next few days passed in a blur. Not because I was busy, but because everything around me moved like it was underwater. Time slowed down, sounds felt distant, and I couldn't seem to connect with anything. My phone buzzed constantly, but I let it ring out. Jess called. A lot. I didn't answer once. Her name on the screen felt like venom. Even seeing her number triggered something physical. A tightness in my chest, a dry ache behind my eyes, like my body itself was rejecting her presence. I didn't tell anyone at first. Not my parents. Not my coworkers. Not even my other friends. What would I say? Hey! I just turned 32 and caught my girlfriend and best friend betraying me in the most cliché way imaginable. I didn't want their pity. I didn't want their outrage. I wanted silence. Space. A vacuum where I could scream without making a sound. I moved out 2 days later. Left the apartment with 2 duffel bags. One full of clothes, the other full of whatever dignity I had left. I stayed in a short-term rental on the other side of the city. A tiny studio with paper-thin walls, squeaky floors, and the constant hum of traffic outside the single window. It wasn't much, but it was mine. More importantly, it had no memories in it. No echoes of her laugh. No traces of his voice. Just 4 walls and a bed where I could lie awake wondering how long it would take to stop feeling like a ghost. Because that's what I had become. A ghost in my own story. A man whose life had been rewritten without his consent. Every song on the radio reminded me of her. Every commercial, every street, every corner of the city held some piece of what used to be us. And it wasn't just the memories that hurt. It was the way those memories had been corrupted. They weren't beautiful anymore. They were hollow, infected. One night, I opened the drawer in the nightstand and pulled out the ring. I hadn't been able to throw it away. Not yet. It sat in a small velvet box, untouched, its cold metal glinting like a cruel joke. I held it in my hand and thought about the moment I bought it. How sure I'd been. How stupidly, blindly sure. I'd gone to 3 different stores to find the perfect one. I remembered the way the clerk smiled at me like I was doing something noble, something real. Now I wondered if she smiled like that at every man walking into a trap. I placed the ring on the table and just stared at it for hours. It didn't cry. It didn't shout. But somehow, it screamed louder than anything else in my life. It mocked me, reminded me of what I'd lost. Not just Jess, not just Mike, but the version of myself who believed in forever. And yet, in all that silence, in all that pain, something strange began to happen. I started to feel free. Not happy. Not yet, but unchained. There were no more lies to decipher. No more pretending. The worst had happened. The ground had given out. And somehow I was still standing. Broken. but standing. The silence after betrayal isn't peaceful, it's deafening. It roars in your ears like waves crashing on an invisible shore. I'd always thought quiet was supposed to be calm, even healing. But after what happened, quiet felt like punishment. Every second I spent alone in that small studio apartment was a confrontation with everything I didn't want to think about. My future, my worth, the reality that the people I loved most had gutted me without hesitation. I tried to distract myself. I really did. I went back to work, pretended everything was fine. I smiled at meetings, answered emails, kept my voice steady. But inside, I was unraveling. I'd sit in my car after hours, engine off, staring at the steering wheel like it held some secret answer to why my life had fallen apart. And some nights, I'd drive without a destination. Just point the car at the horizon and go. Anywhere. Nowhere. As long as it was away from the apartment, away from the weight of memory. I stopped eating regularly. Coffee became a meal. Sleep turned into short, haunted naps interrupted by dreams of Jess's voice or Mike's face. Sometimes both. I'd wake up drenched in sweat, heart racing, only to remember I was alone. And not in the way people mean when they say they're single. This was a different kind of alone. This was existential. But then, in the quiet, something started to shift. One evening, I found myself sitting in a local diner I used to go to before Jess. It was a greasy, no-frills place. Cracked booths, strong coffee, waitresses who called you Han, no matter your age. I hadn't been there in years. Jess preferred trendier spots, places with fusion menus and overpriced cocktails. But here, with the smell of burnt bacon and the sound of silverware clinking, I felt something I hadn't felt in weeks. Safe. Not happy. Not healed. Just safe. For a moment, I started going there every night after work. I'd sit in the same booth by the window, order the same meal, and watch the city outside slowly change from day to night. It became a ritual. A small one. But in a world where everything had shattered, that tiny piece of routine felt like a lifeline. And slowly, painfully slowly, I started to feel my thoughts clear. I started journaling, something I hadn't done since college. I poured everything onto those pages. The rage, the grief, the shame, the guilt, especially the guilt. Because even though I was the one who'd been betrayed, there was a part of me that kept asking what I could have done differently. What I missed, what signs I ignored. And the more I wrote, the more I realized something uncomfortable. I'd made her my world. I'd ignored the cracks because I wanted the picture to be perfect. I'd excused her coldness, her distance, her constant need for validation. I told myself she was just stressed, just tired, that love meant patience. But love doesn't mean blindness. And trust, once broken, leaves behind a scar that never fades, not because of what was done, but because of who did it. I was beginning to see that healing wasn't about forgetting. It was about accepting, not forgiving them, not yet, maybe not ever, but releasing the weight they left behind so I could stand again. And for the first time, I started to believe I could. About 3 weeks after I moved out, I got an email from Jess. Not a text, not a voicemail, an email. Like she was applying for forgiveness the way someone applies for a job, carefully worded, overly formal, and way too late. The subject line was simple. I'm sorry. I didn't open it at first. I let it sit in my inbox like a landmine. For 2 whole days, I just stared at the notification, wondering what she could possibly say that would make any of this make sense. What kind of justification could she give? What twisted version of our story had she rewritten for herself to sleep at night? Eventually, curiosity won. It always does. The email was long. Too long. Paragraphs filled with cliches. I never meant to hurt you. You were always good to me. I didn't realize what I had until I lost it. She wrote about confusion, about loneliness, about how she felt disconnected and Mike had been there when I wasn't. As if that explained everything. As if betrayal was some natural consequence of emotional distance. What struck me most was how much she centered herself in the story. Her feelings, her regrets, her confusion. I read line after line, waiting for her to acknowledge what she'd taken from me. My peace, my trust, my damn future. But that part never really came. Just a lot of, I didn't know what to do. And, I hope someday you can forgive me. Forgiveness. That word hit like a slap. Not because I wasn't capable of it, but because it felt like a demand, not a request. Like she was asking me to clean up her mess so she could sleep easier. I didn't reply. Not because I didn't have anything to say, believe me, I had pages worth, but because sometimes silence is louder than any response. Sometimes the most powerful thing you can say to someone who broke you is nothing at all. But her email did something I didn't expect. It reminded me of who I was before her. I started thinking about the version of me that existed before the relationship. The man who had hobbies, who laughed more easily, who didn't flinch every time his phone buzzed. I began reclaiming those parts, piece by piece. I dusted off my old guitar, started going back to the gym, reconnected with friends I'd slowly drifted from because I was too consumed with being the perfect boyfriend. One of those friends was Tyler, a guy I hadn't seen in almost a year. We met up for drinks, and when he saw me, his eyes widened. "Damn, man," he said. "You look tired." I laughed, a real laugh this time. "Yeah," I said. "Life's been a bit of a soap opera lately." I didn't tell him everything that night. Couldn't. But I told him enough. And instead of pity, he offered something better. Presence. We talked, we drank, we even laughed about old college memories that had nothing to do with her, nothing to do with Mike. For a few hours, I felt like myself again. Not the broken version. Not the angry shell. Just me. And that night, as I walked home under the city lights, I realized something strange. The pain was still there, but it didn't control me anymore. It was part of me, yes, a deep scar that would probably always ache in some way. But for the first time, it wasn't everything. Healing is not a straight line. It's messy, unpredictable. Some days you feel like you've finally broken through the surface, like you're breathing clean air again. And then something yanks you back under, a smell, a song, a face in the crowd that looks too familiar. Or in my case, an unexpected night out that reminded me how fragile recovery really is. Tyler had invited me to a birthday party at a rooftop bar downtown. Normally, I would have said no. The idea of small talk, forced smiles, and pretending everything was okay still exhausted me. But that night, I felt different. Stronger. I had a new jacket, a fresh haircut, and a sense of resolve. I told myself it was time to rejoin the world. To live again. The bar was packed, buzzing with energy. Music pulsed through the air, conversations overlapped, laughter echoed from every corner. I drank slowly, stayed close to people I knew, and for the first hour or so, it wasn't bad. I even found myself smiling. Not the fake kind. A real, relaxed, maybe I'm okay kind of smile. And then I saw her. Jess. Across the room, near the bar, in a black dress I'd seen before, the one she wore to my cousin's wedding 2 summers ago. She looked the same. Familiar and foreign all at once. My chest tightened. My hands went cold. She hadn't seen me yet, but I couldn't stop staring. I didn't want to look, but I also couldn't look away. Then Mike stepped into view. He was with her. They were laughing. His hand was on her back, low. Too low. Just like it had been when they thought I wasn't watching. Just like it must have been in the moments that killed us. And in that instant, everything I'd worked so hard to rebuild cracked. I didn't go over. I didn't cause a scene. I didn't scream or cry. I just turned, walked back to the edge of the rooftop, and stood there with my drink in hand, staring at the lights of the city like they could somehow ground me. Tyler found me a few minutes later. "You okay?" he asked, breath fogging slightly in the night air. I nodded. "Yeah. I just saw ghosts." He didn't press. Just stood next to me in silence, and that was enough. I left early, didn't say goodbye. Took a long walk through the city, trying to shake off the chill that had crept back into my bones. I hated that they still had that power, that just seeing them could bring everything back. But what I realized as I walked was this: their presence didn't destroy me this time. It shook me, yes, but it didn't unravel me. I didn't text Jess. I didn't rage at Mike. I didn't retreat to a dark apartment and fall apart. Instead, I went home, made tea, put on some music, and sat on my couch, not broken, just bruised. And somewhere deep inside, I felt something solid. A quiet strength. Not loud or dramatic. Just real. Because healing isn't about pretending you're unaffected. It's about learning how to survive the aftershocks without losing the ground beneath your feet. A week after seeing them at the rooftop bar, I finally did something I hadn't done in months. I looked at myself. Really looked. Not just a glance in the mirror while brushing my teeth or adjusting my collar, I mean a real, honest look. I stood in front of the mirror one morning, sunlight leaking through the blinds, and just stared at my own face. The lines deeper than I remembered. The eyes darker. Tired, but sharper somehow. Like life had sanded down the old version of me and left behind something leaner. Less naive. More real. I'd spent so long focusing on what they did to me, what they took, what they broke, that I hadn't stopped to consider what had been building in their absence. A quieter strength. A version of me that didn't need their approval, their affection, or even their explanations anymore. Yes, I was still angry. That hadn't vanished. And grief still knocked on my door some nights. But it wasn't a storm now, just weather. Something I could feel and still keep going. That same day, I got a message from a woman I'd met at the diner. Her name was Lauren. We talked once or twice, nothing serious. Just casual conversation over coffee refills. She always had a book in her hand, something dense and worn at the edges, and a smile that felt unhurried. That morning, her message was simple. You ever feel like breakfast that turns into lunch? I stared at it and smiled. It wasn't a date. Not exactly. But it was something. A step. A spark in a place I thought would stay cold forever. I said yes. We met 2 days later, and what surprised me most wasn't how easy it felt to talk to her, it was how little I needed to explain myself. She didn't ask about Jess. Or Mike. Or any of the scars beneath the surface. She just let me be who I was now. The man in front of her, not the one still crawling out of wreckage. That lunch turned into hours. Hours into laughter. And laughter into something I hadn't felt in a long time, not love, not yet, but possibility. I didn't rush. I didn't fall. I walked. Carefully. Consciously. With the awareness of a man who now understood that trust isn't given, it's earned. That loyalty isn't a promise, it's a practice. And that sometimes the most painful endings are what clear the way for something better, not because fate is kind, but because pain has a way of sharpening the soul. By the end of the week, I cleaned out the last box I had left in storage. Inside it, beneath some old books and receipts, was the ring. The one I'd almost given Jess. I held it in my palm for a long time. Felt its weight. Its silence. Its history. And then I let it go. Pawned it that afternoon. Used the money to buy a plane ticket. Not to run, to move forward. Somewhere warm. Somewhere new. Somewhere the past couldn't follow unless I let it. Because moving on isn't about forgetting. It's about remembering who you are without the people who forgot how to love you. It's been nearly a year now. A full cycle of seasons since that night before my birthday, since the moment everything I thought I knew about love and loyalty collapsed in front of me like a house built on sand. And now, sitting on a balcony in a city I never planned to call home, watching the sun melt into the ocean, I feel something I never thought I'd feel again. Peace. Not the naive peace I used to think was happiness, the kind that came from comfort and routine and the illusion that everything was perfect. No, this peace is heavier. Earned. It's the kind that only comes after you've been shattered, after you've crawled through the wreckage and realized you're still breathing. The move was the best decision I've ever made. I didn't tell anyone, not even Tyler, until I'd already signed the lease. I packed my life into a few boxes, sold the rest, and flew out here with nothing but the essentials and a hunger to begin again. I found work easily, something smaller, quieter, less tied to who I used to be. I walk to the office now. No car. No commute. Just me, the sea breeze, and a playlist that changes with my mood. Lauren and I still talk. We never became something serious. We both needed healing more than romance, but her presence reminded me that not all connections are meant to last. Some exist just to show you what's possible again. And that's enough. Sometimes healing begins in the soft spaces between expectations. As for Jess and Mike, I haven't heard from them in months. I think, deep down, they know. Not just that they lost me, but that they lost themselves somewhere in the process. Because that's the real tragedy of betrayal, it's not just about who you hurt. It's about who you become while doing it. And the truth is, I don't envy them anymore. I don't hate them either. I simply don't care. That, I've learned, is the true end of grief, not when the pain stops, but when the past no longer owns you. When you can look back at the fire that burned you and feel nothing but gratitude for the scars. Because scars mean survival. And survival means there's still more life ahead. So this is my story. Not of heartbreak. Not of revenge. But of rising. Of walking away from the ashes without needing to turn them into something beautiful. Of becoming a man who no longer begs for loyalty but demands it of himself. And on the eve of my next birthday, I raise a glass alone, smiling not because everything is perfect, but because I am whole. Alone. But never again lost.